Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, I'm going to be going over my observations and sort of news that came out of OTAs from yesterday. Had the opportunity to attend practice and obviously take notes and kind of review some of the highlights, lowlights, and again, some of the news that came out from yesterday. So that's going to be my main topic for today. Before I get to kind of some of my observations, I just wanted to go over kind of some news and notes first. So first of all, Eric Stokes officially signed his deal. So he is officially signed, sealed, and delivered as a member of the Green Bay Packers. All of it basically a foregone conclusion and just kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but that is 1,000,000% taken care of. And again, he is now officially a member of the Packers. And then one other, news and note just kind of from around the league is Tom Pelissero did report that some of those COVID style rules from a season ago that I think a lot of people, myself included, really, really liked, sounds like some of them may be sticking around. What are those rules exactly? Well, the faster return from injured reserve. So you don't have to wait a long period of time. I think it was 8 or 9 weeks. I forget exactly what it was, but last year it was only 3 weeks that you had to be on IR, and then you could get called back to return. It sounds like that may be potentially sticking around. Also, unlimited players returning from IR. Prior it was 1 or 2 players. Now, going back to last season, you could have as many players come back from IR as possible. So that could be sticking around. Also, the 16-man practice squad, adding more players to the practice squad and keeping it at that 16 mark also could be sticking around. So those are 3 things that I think are of the benefit of the NFL as a whole. I think it benefits the players. I think it benefits the overall product in the NFL. Listen, there is zero reason, and I mean zero reason, why players should not be able to come off of injured reserve when they're healthy. And there's no reason you shouldn't be able to put them on there when they're not healthy. And yes, a Bill Belichick every now and again is going to come along and take advantage of those rules and maybe place a player on IR for 3 weeks or maybe even longer when they could have been on there, maybe didn't even need to be on there at all. And maybe it's a way of stashing a player. Who cares? I certainly don't care. And if a team gets to keep an extra handful of players and they're actually keeping 58 guys instead of 53, kudos to your draft and develop team for having enough players that are worthy of sticking around on your roster. You're still paying them. And I don't honestly see an issue. And, the argument against it, of course, is, well, if teams are stashing players that way, it dilutes the overall talent. You don't want, the Patriots or Packers, keeping the 54th through 58th guys on their roster who might be the 44th or 45th best player on the Bengals or whomever you want to put in as a bad team there. So whatever the case may be, I like these rules. I think they make a ton of sense. No word, however, on practice squad call-ups. So remember last year, you could have 2 players that you could call up from the practice squad for games. So no word of that from Tom Pelissero. None of those are officially confirmed yet. Not the return from IR, the unlimited returns, the 16-man practice squad. None of those are confirmed, but it sounds like teams in the league overall liked the process a season ago during the COVID season, and it seems like most of those rules could be sticking around. So more on that to come, but I think that's good news overall. So let's fast forward past that and get to OTAs, practice, and some of my key takeaways from yesterday. And 1A on my list, and to me, this is a very, very big one. And I want to preface this by saying I am not a doctor, nor do I know what to look at with an injured player coming back from a torn ACL. But from the naked blind eye and from a completely untrained professional, David Bakhtiari looked phenomenal from running out of the Hudson Center onto the field, from doing a variety of leg drills where he's balancing on one leg, bouncing to the other, doing some medicine ball type drills like he was doing. And then he was doing grapevines between some of the different, apparatuses, whatever the heck they are, doing all of that type of work. Whatever he was doing, he looked in phenomenal shape. He looked like he had no issues whatsoever with planting on his leg, with jumping from his leg. You would have had zero idea that he had a torn ACL in December of last year. And yes, it's worth pointing out that players are coming back quicker and quicker and quicker with modern medicine from torn ACLs. But still, this is fantastic news. And I don't want to put a time frame on David Bakhtiari and say that, he's going to be 100% ready to go in week 1. But I will say this. If you told me that he was ready to go week 1, I would say this is probably what you want him to look at in OTAs, on June 2nd. And that's how spry and active and agile he looked. So again, not a doctor. Don't pretend to be a doctor, but he looked fantastic, and I don't think that could be taken as anything but fantastic news for the Green Bay Packers, regardless of who's at quarterback, regardless of what happens the rest of this offseason. If it's Aaron Rodgers, of course, you want Bakhtiari out there. If it's a new quarterback like Jordan Love playing his first snaps, you want the best offensive line possible out there while he's still learning to go through progressions and everything like that. So fantastic news on David Bakhtiari, and just seeing him in person and seeing how good he looked was again, I think, fantastic news. All right, let's go over Jordan Love next. And I mentioned as an observation, and this is one of the toughest things, right? So as I'm tweeting out in OTAs, I am making observations. I am not making commentary the vast majority of times on what I am seeing. I am simply stating, here's what I saw. I'm quickly trying to tweet out as much as I can so I can capture as much action and that you guys can kind of be a part of what I'm seeing. It doesn't allow, especially in a tweet, for me to add a ton of nuance to what's exactly going on. So I noted and observed at practice that Jordan Love was taking a ton of checkdowns, both at the practice last week as well as the practice that was open to media again today. It was check down after check down after check down. The ones that weren't were usually a quick slant, something to get out of his hands quick. If not, it was standing in the pocket for a while and then checking it down at the very end. The vast majority. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 throws today that went past 5 yards. And Rob Domofsky reported that in one grouping of plays, there were 7 straight plays. 6 out of 7 of those went as a check down to the running back. So that was the type of day that it was from Jordan Love when we got into some of those team activities. And Matt LaFleur mentioned this was the first time that they were doing live team 11-on-11 type drills, not just 7-on-7 with Love at quarterback. Per Rob Domofsky as well, Jordan Love ended the day 10 of 17 throwing with 2 sacks and an interception. The interception was a drop by the wide receiver that went to KB Anento, who made a nice play off of a deflection. Was not on Jordan Love, but again, one of those very short passes, intermediate, that again bounced off the receiver's hands, got picked off over the middle. So some pressure on Love. He held onto the ball for a while, and you could just tell there was some indecisiveness as he's just kind of going through his progressions. Again, and I mentioned this last week, what you want to see is you want to see a quarterback who, 1, 2, 3, drop, read out, and making crisp, firm decisions. And for 2 weeks now in a row, we didn't see that from Jordan Love. And more on that in a moment, because again, I want to go over it's basically the exact same notes that I had from a week ago, that now we saw it twice. So rewind just a little bit. Individual drills, once again, Jordan Love looked fantastic. I thought he was incredibly crisp throwing the football. I thought the ball once again exploded out of his hands. He looked confident. He was putting the ball right on the money. There were no errant throws. This was a night and day difference, once again, from what we saw from Jordan Love in training camp a season ago. Even just running through the drills, you could see the level of confidence there. You can tell he's working. You can tell he's progressing. You can tell he's a player that's developing. He's a developmental player. That's what it should be. So let's go back now to those team activities that I was talking about. A lot of checkdowns, a lot of indecisiveness. First of all, and as I mentioned last week, you cannot glean too much from an OTA practice. Whether he looked amazing, whether he looked terrible, whether he was anything in the middle, you can't glean too much of it. We don't, first of all, know usually what Jordan Love is trying to work on in this scenario. However, Matt LaFleur did address it and said basically, hey, he's working on his footwork right now and he wants to marry up the footwork with the timing and everything like that. You know what happens in those situations? You're thinking of your footwork, and now you're thinking of, all right, what are my progressions on the play? And what happens usually is as you're thinking of all that stuff and going through the motions, you're a tick slow. So as you make your first read and you're focusing on getting your footwork right, now that maybe that window is closed, and now you're a step late as you get to 2 and 3, and all of a sudden, the play's broken down a little bit, check down to the running back. And Matt LaFleur made a great mention afterward. He said, listen, whether it was a check down or a throw down the field, I don't care. I want him making the correct reads. The correct reads on the majority of those plays might have been checkdowns. We don't know. More importantly, and as I mentioned last week, When your top 5 wide receivers are out of practice, that makes things much more challenging as well. And a lot of the guys that, have been around over the last year plus while Jordan Love has been here, not there. The guys that he's not, a lot of guys in there that he's not familiar with. Amari Rodgers, Bailey Gaither. I'm sure he hasn't done a ton of work with Reggie Begelton and those type of receivers. So it's all part of the process. And at the end of the day, what I thought from Jordan Love is, again, as I mentioned last week, he looked like a developmental quarterback. There were signs, especially in individual drills, that he's progressing. There in the team drills, he still looks like he's thinking, a little bit hesitant, a little bit indecisive, and a lot of checkdowns. Would I have loved personally, and I heard a couple other people talking as well, would I have loved personally for him to hit that back foot and start just, hitting some reads over the middle down to the sidelines and just really, impressing with some throws? Yeah, that would have been nice to see. That would have been great. But again, this was the first 11 on 11 activities. He's working on a variety of different things. He doesn't have his core wide receivers there, and he's a young quarterback. And all of those things combined make it very, very difficult to put any judgment on what is happening in an OTA practice like that. So the observation is that there were a ton of checkdowns over the last 2 weeks, and he looked a little bit indecisive. But it's a incomplete observation because we don't know all the variables that are going into that and what they're asking him to do on a play-by-play basis. And frankly, while I'm watching Jordan Love, and same with everyone else, as they're watching Jordan Love, and that, we're on the sidelines, right? And we're at eye level. Like, we can't see the progression of the wide receiver and what Jordan Love is seeing. Now, when I'm at a game in my, in my actual season ticket seats, and I'm up on row 35 and I'm in the north end zone and I can see what Aaron Rodgers, and I can kind of from a bird's eye view, obviously I'm not where Aaron Rodgers, but I can see what's developing on the play. You can glean a little bit more than that. Same thing when you get kind of to the end zone cam and the all 22 on tape. In practice like this, it's very tough to say, yeah, he had wide receivers all open and he just wasn't hitting them. I have no idea. And I don't think anyone else that was there does either. I think you'd actually have to have the coach's tape from practice to be able to make some of those judgments. So overall, it's kind of an incomplete grade, right? And again, I'm not grading Jordan Love at practice. That's not what this is for. But again, just trying to make observations and tell you guys what I saw. Ultimately, don't take a ton from it. Training camp will tell a lot more. Preseason will tell a lot more. That's where we'll really start to get a feel of where Jordan Love is in regards to the offense. Let's see what else. KB Nento, I mentioned, had that interception. Reminded me why I really liked KB Nento 2 years ago when he came in as an undrafted free agent. Reminded me why he made the team on the 53-man roster. Had the interception, great ball skills, things like that. But man, he is quick. He is tall. He looks great. He's built great. Just really excited to see if he can kind of get back in this training camp to what he had. He had a roster spot made these last couple seasons. Was hurt. I don't know that he had one 2 years ago, but was hurt last year, which, ultimately on IR the entirety of the year. A player I've really liked, and I'm really hoping that he can bounce back from injury, and great impact today with the interception. Bailey Gaither, really nice day for him. And again, just the juxtaposition between Jordan Love and a veteran quarterback who comes in. Blake Bortles comes in. There's no indecision. He sees Bailey Gaither on a deep post, hits him, overthrew him a little, and Gaither made an amazing diving play. Also later in practice, Jordan Love on a 3rd and 11 in scripted periods hit Gaither over the middle on one of the last plays of team activities. Another really nice reception for Gaither. Looked good after the catch. It reminds me a little bit maybe of like this year's Darius Shepard type player. Smaller, but good in and out of his breaks. Good after, seemed good after the catch. Good hands. Spectacular catch today from Bortles. So nice day from Bailey Gaither. Really nice one-on-one matchup between Shamar Jean-Charles and Amari Rodgers on a slant. Rodgers came in on the slant. Shamar Jean-Charles read it perfectly, batted down the pass. Really nice pass breakup in a battle of the two rookies. A couple other notes. Elton Jenkins, no sign of him at practice, so that will be worth monitoring. I don't believe there was any report as to why he wasn't there. Wide receivers, all top 5 still missing, as I mentioned earlier, so that's another noteworthy, not development, but again, it's at least worth noting. Left tackle position. So David Bakhtiari, of course, recovering from injury, and then Elton Jenkins not there. So who's next man up at left tackle? Maybe Yash Nijman, maybe, Royce Newman kicks out, maybe a Cole Van Lanen. No, it's actually Ben Braden, who does have versatility across the offensive line, can play a variety of positions. I actually really liked him coming out of Michigan as a developmental undrafted free agent type guy, but he originally had a stint with the Packers, went to the Jets, back with the Packers, last year. he's an interesting player, and hopefully he can kind of put everything together as well. But he got the first shot at that left tackle spot with those two players out. Don't read too much into it, but he was in there ahead of Yosh Nijman, as well as, Cole Van Lanen, Royce Newman, etc. So that swing tackle position definitely up for grabs, and Ben Braden got the opportunity today with the ones. Another one, and I kind of mentioned this last week as well, Ty Summers seems to be, at least so far, again, don't read too much into it until training camp, but so far seems to be ahead of Kamal Martin on the pecking order at inside linebacker. Seems to be Chris Barnes 1, and then Ty Summers 2, Kamal Martin 3 at the moment at inside linebacker. So, there were multiple nickel snaps, base snaps where Summers was the number 2 linebacker with Barnes in there, and not Kamal Martin. I don't think that should be so surprising. First of all, when I watched Kamal Martin last season and kind of going back to Minnesota, I think his best trade is on rundowns. So it maybe is slightly surprising that maybe on some of those base situations, and we don't know what defense they were calling, but in base defense when they were in a 3-4, that maybe Kamal doesn't get the nod there, but not super surprised that Summers is there. He's very communicative. He's definitely taking a leadership role in that defense, just on how he's communicating with players. And, I frankly, not like either player was super impressive a season ago, but I would probably have given the nod to Ty Summers over Kamal Martin just on what I saw on tape a season ago as well. So a lot of development opportunity for Kamal Martin still, but as of right now, Ty Summers is ahead of him. I mentioned Eric Stokes earlier signing the contract. I didn't get a great glance at Eric Stokes today, but I do know that multiple reporters were keeping an eye on him and mentioned that he had a great day and he was very sticky in coverage. Now, again, all top wide receivers are gone, so take that with whatever grain of salt that you need to. But obviously great that a lot of the other reporters were keeping a closer eye on him and noticed that he was very sticky in coverage, which is great to hear. Chandon Sullivan was at the star position, so he continues to hold down that spot, that slot corner. Was there, obviously, all last year. Was there last practice a week ago, and was there again today as that number 1 nickel corner. So we'll see what happens when Jair gets back and when that entire secondary is all together, how some of that shakes out. It's a little tougher to tell with Jair not there right now and how they're maybe reshuffling things, but last 2 practices open to media, it was Chandon Sullivan primarily in that spot. And then last but not least, in the press conferences afterwards, post-practice, I thought the big takeaway, the big interesting note was Matt LaFleur on Bobby Tunyon saying that since he came to Green Bay, the most improved player on the team has been Robert Tunyon. And I mean, you can't get any higher praise than that. And as a player who, when I went back and at his very first, OTA or mini camp that I was at, and I've told this story multiple times, Jimmy Graham, Mercedes Lewis were making their debut as Green Bay Packers, and I was watching the tight ends all day. Late in practice, Tunyon gets a catch up the seam over the middle. I thought it was Jimmy Graham, and I'm like, man, these tight ends look great. And it was Tunyon, and he caught my eye. And from that day forward, we saw the touchdown against Seattle early in his career down the field, and then he's just continued to develop. And it sounds like Matt LaFleur is ready to get him even more involved in the offense this season. Incredibly excited about that. He's a heck of a football player. He's becoming more vocal as well. You can tell he's getting more comfortable out on the field, and is whether you want to call that a leadership role or whatever, you just tell he's more comfortable out there. Fun to see a player like that develop and really not a draft and develop, but claim and develop type story for Green Bay. Hell of a find for the Green Bay Packers in Robert Tunyon. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Hope you enjoyed this episode and recapping the Packers OTAs from yesterday. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow, as always. But until tomorrow and until next time, and as always, you know the rest. Go Pack Go.